Hello everyone and welcome to the Unseen Fear channel. Story, The Curse of Sentis Hollow. In the land of Thorne, there was a forgotten village tucked away between two towering mountain ranges, surrounded by dense forests and steep ravines. The village, known as Senta, had once been a thriving settlement, prosperous and full of life, where the people celebrated the changing seasons with grand festivals and shared stories of ancient gods. But that was centuries ago. The present-day Senta was little more than a shadow of its former self. A cursed land that had long since lost its light. The villagers were few, their faces gaunt with fear, and their eyes hollow from years of silent suffering. They no longer celebrated. They did not laugh. They had learned to live with the constant nagging feeling that something was wrong. Something far older than they could understand, something that could never be escaped. The curse that had befallen Senta began with a single fateful event, the breaking of a sacred oath. Long before the land was cursed, the people of Senta had been blessed, or so they thought, by a strange entity that resided deep within the hollow, a vast, dark expanse that lay beyond the village's borders. It was said that the Hollow was home to an ancient force, older than time itself, and that it had the power to grant great favor or terrible misfortune. No one knew its true nature, but every few generations the village elders would venture into the Hollow and return with strange trinkets and promises of protection, always accompanied by cryptic warnings. They spoke of appeasing the entity, of respecting its boundaries, and of never failing to offer a tribute in exchange for the Hollow's favor. The people of Senta had always respected this pact, and for generations the village prospered. But that all changed with the arrival of a young woman named Elira. She was strong-willed, curious, and determined to prove that the old ways, those superstitions and rituals, were nothing more than tales meant to keep the people under control. Elira was a dreamer, filled with the fire of youth and the arrogance that comes with it. She believed she could break free of the village's history, rise above the fears and doubts of her ancestors. And so, when she came of age, she made a decision that would change the fate of Senta forever. She would venture into the Hollow herself, to seek the source of the strange, unspoken terror that the elders whispered about in the dead of night. She would find out once and for all what lay at the heart of the Hollow, and prove that the old gods had no power over the lives of the people of Senta. One night, under the cover of darkness, Elira slipped away from the village. She crossed the boundary lines, marking the beginning of the Hollow, and ventured deeper into the heart of the ancient woods. The trees were twisted, their branches gnarled and thick, the air thick with a damp, oppressive weight. As she ventured deeper, the forest seemed to close in around her, the shadows lengthening, the world growing colder. The whispers of the trees grew louder, though their words were indecipherable. Elira's heart beat faster with every step, yet she refused to turn back. Her courage was unshakable, driven by the belief that she would uncover the truth of Senta's fear. Hours passed, and the further Elira went, the more the world around her seemed to change. The forest no longer felt alive, but suffocating, as though the very air itself was laden with malice. The trees seemed to leer at her, their branches twitching, as though watching her every move. She finally reached a clearing, at the center of which stood a colossal stone structure, ancient and crumbling, its surface covered in ivy and moss. It was shaped like a massive, jagged altar, surrounded by symbols and runes, markings that pulsed with an unnatural light. Elira approached the altar cautiously, the air growing thicker with every step. As she reached the base, a cold breeze swept through the clearing, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble. The wind whispered, urging her to leave, to turn back. But Elira's defiance only grew stronger. She placed her hand on the stone, and immediately a searing pain shot through her arm. as though the altar itself was alive, feeding off her very energy. A voice, ancient and deep, echoed in her mind, resonating through her bones. "You dare trespass where none have stood for centuries? You who have broken the pact, who dare disturb the balance?" Before she could pull her hand away, a thick black mist poured from the stone, enveloping her entire body. Her breath became shallow, her limbs heavy, as if the very air was sucking the life from her. A terrible, inhuman wail echoed through the forest, and for a brief moment, Elira thought she saw something moving in the mist. Shapes, shadows, twisted forms that seemed to writhe in agony. "The price must be paid," the voice continued, growing louder, more commanding. "A soul for a soul. A trespasser must give their life, or their legacy will be taken. The curse will be reborn." Elira screamed, trying to pull away, but the mist held her in place. The whispers around her grew deafening, the very earth trembling beneath her feet, as though the land itself was alive, angry. The stone beneath her hands began to crack, and from within the cracks, black, oozing tendrils began to emerge, wrapping around her limbs, tightening like chains. Suddenly, a flash of light cut through the darkness. It was bright, blinding, so intense that Elira's eyes burned. She tried to scream, but no sound came. In that moment, she realized that the hollow was not a place of magic or wonder, but a prison. A prison built by an ancient, malevolent force that had been lying in wait, biding its time. And now she had released it. Her body stiffened, her vision blurring as the mist consumed her entirely. The last thing she saw before the world faded to black was the altar crumbling, and in its place, a shadow that loomed over the forest like a great monstrous being. A creature born of darkness, its eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger. When Elira's body was found the next morning by the villagers, her eyes were wide open, frozen in a look of pure terror. Her skin was pale, as though drained of all color, and her body was twisted in a way that suggested unnatural contortions. But the most chilling part was her expression. There was no sign of peace, no sign of death. It was as if she had been caught in the throes of a nightmare that had followed her into the waking world. The elders of Senta gathered in secret, speaking in hushed tones about the curse that had been unleashed. It was clear now. Elira had broken the pact, disturbed the ancient entity in the hollow, and in doing so, had unleashed something far more terrifying than they could have imagined. The curse of Senta was no longer just a superstition. It was real, and it was awake. The village was soon plunged into chaos. Those who had once lived in fear now found themselves hunted by shadows. Dark, insidious forms that stalked the forest, moving like ghosts in the night. The hollow had taken its toll, and the villagers were no longer safe. They could hear the whispering in the trees, the moans and cries of the lost souls that now roamed the woods. The ancient entity, once thought to be a mere myth, had risen, and it was hungry. As the days passed, strange phenomena began to occur. The ground began to crack and split, opening up great chasms that seemed to lead to an abyss of black nothingness. The animals that had once roamed the forests were now twisted, corrupted, their eyes glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. The very sky above the village darkened, and the sun barely seemed to rise anymore, leaving the people of Senta to live in perpetual twilight. The elders gathered once more, this time with the knowledge that the curse could not be undone. The hollow had claimed its due, and now it was only a matter of time before the village of Senta would be swallowed whole by the darkness. There was no escape. The curse was eternal. In the years that followed, Senta vanished from maps, and the village was swallowed by the woods, overtaken by the creeping tendrils of the hollow. Those who ventured too close would hear strange sounds, whispers carried by the wind. or perhaps the faint cries of the villagers who had once lived there. But no one dared enter. The hollow had claimed its due, and the curse of Senta would live on, echoing through the forest, a warning to all who dared to trespass. And if you listen closely, on a windless night, you might still hear the whispers of Elira, calling out from the dark corners of the hollow, her voice lost in the shadows, her soul, like all the others, forever bound to the ancient force that now ruled the land. Blowing the cobwebs away, one slips and the crab goes down.